Welcome back to More Than a Game, a podcast dedicated to the A-League, the Premier League and more. This week on the pod, the Roos topple Kuwait, City add a new Roo, while Victory rue the season that was. There's a Brazilian on the Central Coast. The youth have arrived just in time for the finals, but what's happened to the Woo? I'm Damon. I'm hosting the pod today, and I've got with me Colby from sunny Brisbane. How are you going, mate?
Good, mate. It's great to be not on the intro, like in the pod and not on the intro. I'm loving it.
I know, right?
Happy to be here in my little cupboard office in sunny Brisbane.
I guess we'll jump right into it. We'll start with, what was your moment of the week this week in the world of football, or mainly Australian football?
I think it's pretty obvious. It'll be obvious to all those viewing the podcast on the YouTube feed, either live or after this. It's the Roos being back. It's pretty clear we're both pretty pumped about it. Just happy to see the boys back. I think they tweeted out on the official account it had been like 560 something days since the Roos had last played a game, and it felt
too long.
It really felt it, like a completely new squad almost. With a lot of stalwarts either having been retired or just not featuring. So just good to see the boys back.
Yeah, look, my moment of the week was, it was the Roos as well, but it was the low-hanging fruit. So I've got another one here that was, just the round that was this week in the A-League, and we'll get to it when we do the match reviews, but there was some brilliant goals, some brilliant moments, and we'll talk about them, but it was a great round of football all in all, and it's just a shame that it wasn't all at the same time on the same day as the final day should be. It's always a talking point. In terms of what we didn't like this week, Colby, what stood out for you? What didn't you like? What was your own goal?
A couple of things, but the main thing that stood out to me was a bit of a soccer Twitter favorite. It's just like beating up something that's, some small thing happens and everyone just jumps on it. And this week it was that FTBL article just trashing the viability of the National Second Division, quoting some supposed former NSL star turned economist, Frank Bruniskevich, as its source. Don't know. No one knows, Damo. No one knows who he was. But the article was quickly deleted, and many on social media and soccer Twitter in particular started to question the veracity of the claims of the article and the source of the article, most of all. Citing no hits anywhere on the internet for this mystery economist. There are a few clever memes. I didn't really get it, to be honest. I don't get the fascination with like soccer Twitter figuring out that something's wrong. Like, good on you, soccer Twitter detectives. But there were like 3 parody accounts of this within like a couple of hours when the joke had just well and truly just peaked already, and just goes to show that the life cycle of a meme is very short. Yeah,
that's right. Soccer Twitter is always the source of many own goals for us, but we'll move on from that. My own goal this week came from, it was a midweek game between the Roar and the Wanderers. I'm sure you saw this, Colby, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have seen it as well. It was the pre-match interview with Carl Robinson, who was asked about how does he get the team up for a game like this, and I haven't got verbatim what he said, but the general gist of what he tried to say in a live press conference was that, there's problems in his dressing room. There's no leaders to speak up and to really, motivate the boys. And he has to do that himself. And that's a problem. And he needs to fix that before next season. And I just thought that was a real kick in the teeth for the playing group, and particularly the leadership group of the team. And it's not a good look for the club. And it's a surefire way to get the fans offside. Colby, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And I think this was the one from the Raw game. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
We spoke about this one last week on the pod, and we're just as confused as well. Like, we're all still scratching our heads over those comments. They were just like, I don't know. And I haven't seen any of the players come out and say anything about it. I'm sure that's sort of being kept a tight lid on at the moment amongst the playing group. But like, I don't think it's the last we will have heard of that. It sounds like, yep, he's got an interesting managerial style and an interesting relationship with some of the players. And I think, more to come.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, more on that and Carl Robinson's journey at the Wanderers. But we'll move on to some news items first, and then some listener questions. The first news item that broke this week was news that the 3 A-League clubs that were in the Asian Champions League have pulled out. What do you think the consequences of that might be? Obviously, it was on the back of the COVID situation in the world and having to quarantine and all this stuff, and it would just be too difficult for the Australian clubs, as it seems. But what do you think the consequences of that might be?
Yeah, I mean, another one that we haven't heard the last of. There was a statement from the AFC saying they'd noted the decision of the 3 APL clubs that had pulled out of the ACL. And I think everyone's expecting there to be some pretty serious sanctions. What those are, we don't know. But yeah, there's going to be some pretty serious consequences, I think, with both the AFC not willing to budge on sort of moving around fixtures and things like that. I think, whether this decision had come straight from the clubs directly or the APL, I'm sure that the two were in a dialogue about this. The two groups, the clubs and the APL, were in a dialogue about this. Don't know whose decision it really was at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision because I think they all want to play in Asia. But it's going to have some pretty big blowback, I think.
Yeah, look, and we've seen in the past that the AFC have been a little bit offside with Australian football, particularly over the last, say, 4 to 5, maybe 6 years, and the way they believe we've approached being as part of the AFC. So it'll be interesting to see, if they put the hammer down, if they kind of make a point out of this, or what comes of it. But yeah, like you said, Colby, more to come on that.
Hopefully Oceani will take us back and
yeah,
all-time top scoring Socceroo, scoring like 100 goals against, like, I don't know,
Tahiti
and stuff. Yeah,
poor New Zealand. They were the big fish in the Oceania. We're back.
We're coming back, baby.
Oh god! All right. We'll move on to the next big news item this week. Was Optus Sport. There's so much talk about TV rights and what football is shown where and on what platform these days. And Optus Sports have announced that they've won the rights to the 2023 Women's World Cup. So that's huge in terms of broadcasting. Obviously, we're hosting it, so there's going to be a lot of attention, a lot of media attention around that. So I think that was a big coup for Optus to nab that in front of other broadcasters.
Yeah, and I thought this was like, when this got announced and everyone was sort of buzzing around about it, I thought that, like, I was like, oh, that's official. I mean, I thought.
Oh, you thought it was a given already? You just assumed
I thought
it was.
This was just a foregone conclusion. Oh, it's going to be on Optus. Optus have got this, and I didn't even realize that it was a thing that was like waiting to be announced. But great. I mean, good that it's all on Optus. Hopefully, they'll be doing like what KO's doing. They'll sort of open up as freebies the Matildas games at the very least, all of the group stage games, and assuming the Matildas get through the group, those other games as well, because I think that's really important. I don't know what the state of our anti-siphoning laws will be by then.
I was just about to comment on that. I think the contract that the APL, or the FFA rather, the FA are in the process of negotiating the broadcast deal for the Socceroos and the Matildas, which is now independent of the broadcast deal that the APL just negotiated with CBS Paramount. It's an independent deal, and that will include every game of the Socceroos and Matildas, regardless of what tournament they're in. So you would assume that would cover the 2023 World Cup, and that the Matildas, would most definitely be on free-to-air TV to get as much exposure as we can to a good push at a World Cup.
Like, if we're hosting the World Cup and
we're not on free-to-air TV,
and we're not on free-to-air TV, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I assume that's going to be the case, but yeah, just thought that was an interesting one.
Yeah, and look, we'll move on to a couple of listener questions this week. We've got a few good ones, and we'll move on to, I think, a couple of people sent it in. ALeague Villa and Marco23 both asked us our opinions on the FFA Cup playoffs. We haven't really spoken about it much. They haven't been advertised much. There hasn't been much talk about it. But, it seems to be a brilliant concept. We briefly spoke about it a few weeks ago on the pod, and they start at the back end of this week. So, of the teams that finished 11th to 14th, only 2 of those are going to qualify for the FFA Cup. I guess, what are your predictions, Colby?
Who were those teams, Damo? The teams that finished 11th to 14th? Talk us through it.
Well, I'll have to grab the table up, but it'd be Wellington, Western Sydney, Victory, and who's the other one that didn't make the finals? Newcastle. And then what would there be?
So they have to go through an extra round now?
Yeah. So essentially, they're having the same amount of A-League teams qualify for the FFA Cup. They just have to play off against each other, and two of them get eliminated before the round of 32, which I think is a great concept in terms of A-League teams against A-League teams that don't enter the Cup until that round. And it makes for another thing to play for, right? While the finals are on, the other teams are in the FFA Cup playoffs. So everyone's still playing football, and it's more of a broadcast deal as well. So
yeah,
but
it's so tough to predict, isn't it?
I don't even know who's playing who, to be honest. I actually haven't even. I tried to look it up earlier. I don't know who's playing who.
Yeah, no, neither do I. And ALeague Villa points out on Twitter that it's starting very soon, and I've seen not that much about it. Like, there's not a lot of traction on social media. So I mean, I'm keen to see more about it and keen to follow it and watch it. But one of the things about the FFA Cup that we normally notice, though, is that like the teams that you never expect sort of go deep. Like the Mariners in the past, where they haven't been that good, have gone deep, and the likes of like the Roar and the Vuck and others that you'd expect to go a bit further in it have been knocked out early. I think if it's starting very soon, you wouldn't say that the Jets or the Vuck will have a lot of love in that tournament. I think the Woo and Wellington they'll definitely go through based on their form and just their squads on paper. They've got to be better than anything that's going around below A-League level for sure.
Yeah, and I wonder what impact the lockdown in Victoria here has, and whether the Victory can travel elsewhere to play a game at the back end of this week. If we come out of lockdown on Thursday, they can play in a Thursday or Friday night game, but other than that, that might be complications there. So I guess more to come on that. Is another one from A-League Villa here, which is maybe a bit of a sore point for me. He made a point that Matt Derbyshire is the second highest goal scorer in the league this season, but isn't getting enough attention. It was me at the start of the season that said Matt Derbyshire was overrated and wouldn't be good in the A-League. And he scored 13 goals to sit him, 12 goals behind Jamie McLaren, but still a good output for a guy who's come to the league, and he's kind of, like A-League Villa said, flown under the radar a bit.
You just have to accept that you've given him that M-Tag turnaround, Damo. Like we've done, like I've done with Bruce Kamau and Wales. As soon as they've been just trashed well enough on this podcast, their fortunes just turn around. And Derbyshire, I think you've turned him around, Damo.
Yeah, I'll take credit for that. Yeah.
Because that was a general listener question that we put out on the social medias today, on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit, about what sort of storylines in the run up to finals and over the course of the season are not getting the attention that they deserved. And we had a lot of responses. Actually, we had a good amount of responses across Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit as well. Jack McDonald on Facebook just says Roberto Clisby, which, I mean, Tommy's been getting around him. I think Clisby must be Tommy's boy by now.
It's got to be Shannon's boy, I reckon, if anyone's.
Yeah, Shannon's all over Clisby, and I think he's in our he's watching live on YouTube tonight as well. So Shannon, let us know if Clisby's your boy, but I think he's got to be a lot of people's boys after the performances he's been putting in lately. He's only waited like 60 odd A-League games to start putting in these performances. Better late than never.
The Gareth Bale of the A-League.
I hope it continues. I hope it's just not a hot run of games. I'm looking forward to just seeing him dominating next season.
Well, that and the rest of the Mariners, which is another point. It was made by someone on Reddit, said the Mariners bandwagon, it kind of really dropped off towards the end, but finishing third after finishing bottom last season is a huge story, and it probably hasn't been spoken about enough towards the back end of the year when they lost a bit of form.
Go on, Damo.
Yeah. Oh, well, if you got any more to say on that, I was going to jump to the next one. Yeah. The other one, which I completely agree with, is the influx and development of, local goalkeepers and young goalkeepers. Obviously, Australia's got a rich history with goalkeepers and creating top level goalkeepers across the world. But, we've got Margush, Delianov, Sale, Scott, Federici came home. Tom Glover, Tom Hewitt-Bell played well on the weekend. Jamie Young continues to be a fine goalkeeper across the league, albeit a bit of a brain fart this weekend. But, there's a lot of good Australian goalkeepers and a lot of good young Australian goalkeepers. And
Macklin Freak, Damo, deputised very well for Jamie when he was injured earlier this season. And you'd think that if Jamie did leave the Raw or retire or anything like that, that Macklin Freak would sort of step right into the breach there.
Yeah, definitely.
Just on this comment, Damo, about the influx of great keepers in the league and great young Australian keepers as well. I know there's it was funny because it was I swear it was last season where we were talking about, or where it was being talked about in the media that, should we have a quota for Australian keepers? Because we're everyone was worried, Robbie Slater and friends at Fox were really worried that there was going to be this big drought of Aussie goalkeepers, and next year we're swimming in them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that, and we probably delved into that on the pod, thinking it would be a good idea. I think I remember saying it was a good idea to have something like that in the A-League. But as we've seen this year, maybe it's a result of what happened with COVID and having to force young players to come through and the way that this season played out. But we've seen a lot of these kids step up from NPL level and turn into great quality A-League goalkeepers. Which is a good point onto a good segue onto our last submission from a user, which said he doesn't think that enough has been said about the players and what they've had to go through this year in terms of what happened with COVID. Obviously the Knicks spent the vast majority of the year in Sydney. All the stuff that's been going on in Melbourne. It's been a huge season for everyone. And they've done it purely for our entertainment, and what an entertaining season it has been on the back of these guys and girls and whoever's involved with the club, the coaches, the performance staff, the players, the sacrifices they've gone through just to play football for us to watch has been incredible.
Yeah, and so this comes from Handsome Dan NZ on Reddit. Love some of these usernames on Reddit. But, I agree with the comment, but he sort of had downplayed the Knicks. I mean, yeah, we've all heard about them, but I think it bears repeating and it bears emphasising that the Knicks, the sacrifice they've made to sort of, they've had 2 games in New Zealand. They've been back to New Zealand twice, in the space of a whole season. All of their squad have been over here, away from their fans, and completely based in another country.
And a lot of them left their families back in New Zealand for most of the period too. So
that's massive, and that definitely deserves repeating and emphasising, and I'm sure it will be, in the sort of wash up to the season.
Yeah, and as always, thanks for the user submissions, the questions, and it's always good to get your opinion. Next up, we'll talk about the A-League Match Week 24. Colby, we'll start with what we're calling the Wooden Spoon Derby. It's the Melbourne Derby. I didn't watch much of this game, so I'll have to rely on you to give me the rundown on how this went. But obviously, we saw how it all ended at the very end. There was an overturned VAR decision, and Victory went down the other end and got the point that they needed to avoid finishing 12th. But what was your thoughts on the game and how did it play out?
Yeah, I thought the game, it went sort of more or less as you would have expected the game to. It was heavy pressure from City around the VUC box. Tilio was the main focal point for City for much of this, and another one for City was Florian Berenguer. I always forget he's still playing for them. Whenever I see him, and he had a good game as well. But they couldn't really unleash on the Victory in the same way that City has done throughout this season. Obviously, Mac is a big out. I think everybody on social media had all the wooden spoon sort of memes and posts.
I was all over it. I jumped the gun.
And a few people have jumped the gun, got too early, and good on the Victory for playing for playing it out and going for the point to try and avoid this, because if it does come off, and it still can come off, the Victory now sit a point ahead of the Jets, and the Jets have that game in hand against City.
Who
as the
knows when
last
that's
game
going
of
to
the
be
season.
played?
Who knows what City are going to do? City could,
Yeah.
it's in City's hands, really. I mean, can they? I mean, it's not in the spirit of the game, but they could, they could forfeit or tank and hand their rivals their first ever wooden spoon in their history. In terms of the game, the VUC were clearly motivated by avoiding the spoon, and that made it quite a good game to watch, quite an intense game to watch, even though it was played behind closed doors down in Melbourne.
Yeah, and look, I think for me the biggest talking points from this game were Raphael had a starting debut for Melbourne City, whose dad Cristiano Scott Jamieson played with at Adelaide United for a couple of seasons in the very, very, very early stages of the A-League. And I think the other big story was, and City really made a big point of this afternoon before the game, was that they'd included 15-year-old Max Capouto in their squad for the first time. I think it makes him the second youngest player in City's A-League history, and I think the 10th youngest player in Australian domestic football history to play in the top division. And he's had a great season so far in the NPL 3. He's leading the Golden Boot there with 9 goals in 8 games. So a well-deserved spot, behind. Obviously, he's come in because Jamie McLaren's away and Andrew Naboot's injured, and it's a chance to play some kids, but it's a well-deserved spot nonetheless.
Yeah, the youth factory is alive and well, and the City Academy is clearly up and running at full capacity, just pumping these kids out of Sporting Casey. So really good to see the more getting chances this year, and I'm sure it's going to happen next year as well. And I know a lot of teams are doing this, but it just, to me, it stood in stark contrast to the victory, and that was sort of talked about a lot on social media in the lead up, especially around the announcement of Lecky going to City. That put the sort of the comparison between these two clubs into sharp focus, and things like academies and training grounds and facilities and all of that kind of stuff was sort of picked apart and talked about it. But it was put into sharp focus by that, and you couldn't help but sort of view the game through that lens as well. And it seems at the moment that the trophy cabinet is really the only thing that the VUC have still got on City after this season. Like I think you put a tweet out, Damo, to say,
yeah, I'll just read it out for you. So talking about comparisons of the team, Melbourne City's goal difference is 57 better than Melbourne Victory's this year. They're at complete opposite ends of the table. Melbourne City's crowd home attendance was bigger than Melbourne Victory's this year, and their biggest crowd of the season was bigger than Melbourne Victory's biggest crowd of the season. And the last point I put there is there's still only one team in Melbourne. So it's like the gap this year, as you could say, is the noisy neighbours are here to stay. And I think you make a good point about the academy and moving to the southeastern suburbs and the amount of talent they're going to be able to bring through. There's only going to be more stories like Max Capouto coming through as a 15-year-old in the first team.
Yeah, and the other side of it is, like, I mean, it was last season as well that the VUC weren't having a very good year. It's pretty much been ever since Muskie left, to be honest. But and people have been, including us, have been singing the praises about how well run the club is. The VUC are run from a business perspective, and all the things that they've been doing. But then after it takes a couple of bad seasons like this and quite a lot of bad recruitment to really sort of send them right down and really put into focus the fact that despite the VUC's head start, they still haven't sort of set up an academy matching the likes of what the City have now got, and they still don't have they're still like training in a park. So I think that one of the things that will be talked about is that sort of 5+ or whatever year advantage it was that the VUC had of sort of what have they done with it?
Yeah, it's a great point. And we've seen, and we'll talk about another couple of clubs who think they're big clubs who are in really the bottom of where they could be at the moment. And in saying that, we'll move on to the next game. Newcastle and Perth played out a 1-1 draw this weekend. There was really nothing to play for but pride in this game, and I guess, as we spoke about before, some momentum going into the FFA Cup playoffs. Both teams aren't going to be in the finals. This game was brilliant. It wasn't brilliant. Sorry, it was two brilliant pieces of individual, spectacular. Bruno Fornaroli's goal after about 20 minutes from 30 odd yards out, on a postage stamp in the top corner. And it was only evened out by an equally fantastic, deft little chip from Thurgate late in the second half. But I think on balance of the game, a draw was probably a fair result. Colby, did you watch this game?
I only saw the highlights of this one. I didn't catch this one, Damo, but I did see the Thurgate goal. I thought that was very well taken, and good of him to pop back up. I thought we haven't.
Finally he's doing something.
He's had a bit of an inconsistent season. I think 19-20 was a good season for him, and 18-19 he was looking like he was on the way up. But I mean, maybe it has something to do with the sort of uncertainty and the sort of transience of a lot of that dressing room, that he can't sort of get into a good rhythm with those players around him. And I'm sure losing the likes of Abini and Ugarkovic really hurts what he's able to do as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. And on the topic, we were talking about youth before and City, and it's a topic we'll talk about on probably every game this week. Newcastle had a 16-year-old Archie Goodwin started for the second time for Newcastle, and he probably could have had a couple of goals early on. He missed a few big chances, and I think that kind of buckled his confidence a bit, and he kind of fizzled out towards the second half and towards the end of the game, unfortunately. But more promising signs, and I guess the more talent that Newcastle can bring through. We know it's a very football-centric area, and they've always prided themselves on the local players they can push into the first team. More players like Archie Goodwin is only good for Newcastle and good for the A-League. But in saying that, it's Craig Dean who at the back end of this season has said he's really focused on giving those local players a lot of time and giving the young players a lot of time. And he's this week said he's stepping down as manager of Newcastle Jets. Colby, do you think that's the right decision?
I think it is. I mean, he only really reluctantly took the role in the first place after coming in as caretaker about 100 times. And when there was no one left to manage the club, he's finally sort of stepped up and taken it on full time. I don't think his heart was really in it. I'm sure he gave it everything, but I'm sure, it just wasn't the right job for him. And I think it is the right decision. And I've heard sort of some. I think there was an article on SBS suggesting Arthur Papas might be coming back to take up the role, and I think he might be coming back to the country for family reasons. I'm not too sure what's going on there, but I mean that would be huge for the club.
Yeah. Obviously, Arthur Papas has been over in Japan. He had a couple of assistant roles, I think, at Shimizu when another Australian coach was there, and I think he's the head of the managerial team. It's a J-League 3 team at the moment. So coming home to take up a role in the A-League, like you said, might be for family reasons, but I think he'd be a great appointment. I've also heard Johnny Anastasiados' name thrown around, which are two products of the Victorian NPL, which seems to seemingly be putting out coaches year on year now that are good enough for the A-League. So I think it'd be great to see a local coach take on a role at Newcastle to see what they can do, especially when, developing youth is a big part of their club, and that's what NPL teams are really all about. We'll move on to the next game, which was, I've just lost my run sheet here. Probably, if you got the next, here we go. The next game was
the Mariners and the Woo, Damo.
Yeah, that's of course. I said in the intro, where was the Woo? And I think this is 8 consecutive games. Yeah, exactly. I think this is 8 consecutive games the Woo have gone now without a win towards the back end of the season, which, like we said before, the Mariners have secured a home final. They, 2-0 victors over the Woo. But the Woo probably had the better run of this game, Colby. I don't know if you watched it. I watched this game, and the Woo, on balance of the game, deserved far more than they did. They controlled the game. They controlled the ball, had the lion's share of possession. But, when it came down to it, they really couldn't create much in the final third. It's like they're missing a player like Max Burgess to break lines.
We need Tommy on the pod for that comment. But,
it would hit different if Tommy was here.
It would hit different. It would really hit different.
Yeah, but look,
yeah,
the Mariners ran away with all the 3 points after, their counter attacking was just as incisive and effective as it has been all season. And the Brazilian pops up on the Central Coast again with Clisbinho, just absolutely brilliant bit of technique on the chest and volley into the bottom corner. We've already spoken about him earlier on in the pod, but Colby, can he keep performing like he has over the last 2 months, especially?
I can't believe some of those finishes. Like we talked about last week, like he could have had like two more goals than he even did. Like he could have had like 4 goals last week. Just unbelievable. I mean, I don't know what he's been having for breakfast. I don't know what's changed. Is he putting his socks on in different order or something like that? But like, just not the same player. But yeah, I really do hope it continues because we just need more ginger fullbacks. Just scoring screamers. That's what
that's awesome. As we said, the Mariners secured a home final, and it's huge considering where they finished last year and where everyone predicted them to finish this year. And another talk about youth. Stadge handed an A-League debut to a 17-year-old Central Coast Academy product called Jing Reese. He's got 7 goals in 12 games in NPL2 this season in New South Wales, and there's been a lot of talk about his performances in the NPL and the way he trains. He's really dedicated to improving, and he's come from nowhere this season to start to getting a game in the A-League. So, with Alu Kuol heading off at the end of this season to go on a European adventure, is a spot for someone else to take, and maybe it's someone like Jing Reese that can step up into that kind of role.
Yeah, and I mean, poor old Qual. Like, I honestly don't know the circumstances around this move to the Bundesliga or to German football. Don't know the circumstances. Don't know like whether some relationship broke down in the Mariners after or before, or during the time he was sort of agitating for this move, if he was agitating for one. But whatever the reason and whatever happened, he got benched. He got benched after he signed that contract, and it definitely shows. Like he looked quite rusty when he came on, and I don't know if the club kept the receipts or not, but hopefully not, because I
was going to say it's almost like it's over the balance of a season, someone can't be spectacular all year. They have their ups and downs, and this is his down, but you don't know what went on at the club, and like you said. Best of luck to him on his move, and hopefully it works out for him. I don't want it to be another Kwame Yeboah situation where he goes for 8-9 years and comes back a worse player. So I think another couple of – sorry, go on.
Oh, no. I just wanted to actually go back to the point you made before, Damo. Just completely away on the Mariners finish. I just think it's worthwhile just going back to that and just hammering that home as well. And we will again probably in our season review when we look back at the season as a whole. But like all of us and every Mariners fan, like their wildest expectation for the season would have just been to like not get the wooden spoon and to finish in finals in 3rd position. They're going to host a home final. That's just incredible. Good on their fans for all sticking it through. There were some fans there that were like, were season members for like 5+ years in a row, and they were just rocking up to Gosford and watching their team get smashed every week, and they were finishing rock bottom, and they weren't playing good football. And they deserve this, and Stadge deserves the praise as well. Like huge achievement and a massive vindication of his coaching ability as well. Particularly after
great
the
point.
way he sort of left the Matildas, and people were, thinking, oh, what's he going to do now? And, is he actually a good coach, or was he just made to look good by coaching a great group of players in the Matildas? But no, he's shown himself to be a great manager, to be able to get what he's got out of that squad, because we said at the start of the season, no one's come into the squad. It was like Bozanic came in and that was it. And what Stadge has been able to do, he's like got a tune. He's got Ruan Tonjika's Socceroos spot, and he was like basically circling the drain himself. He was on like his 3rd A-League club, and basically the next step was like down to NPL, and now he's in the Socceroos. Like, and that's just one player. Like he's got Kai Rolls playing brilliant. He's got a tune back out of
Clisbinho.
Clisbino, come on. Like, I mean, yeah, Stadge deserves, and I think will get a lot of credit out of this season.
Yeah, that's a great point. But I want to move on to the Woo, Colby. I said in the intro, where's the Woo? What's happened to them? Eight successive games without a win now to finish the season. I guess the question is what's the future of their squad, of their manager? Is Diamante going to stay? I don't know if he signed an extension yet. Is Rudin going to stay? What are your thoughts?
It's the kind of turnaround in performances that you just can't believe. You just cannot. You look at this squad on paper and you look at their results earlier in the season. When they were playing quite well, they were playing some really good football. They made the finals in their first season last year. Yeah, like there's been a couple of changes in the squad over the off season. I don't remember exactly how many, but it wasn't a huge turnover in the squad, and they were playing reasonably well the first half of this season, and then just an absolute drop off a cliff. It has to be down to something more like that. It's the kind of form that happens when when a manager's lost the dressing room or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say that. There seems to be a rift between either the players or the managerial group, or something's going on that something just doesn't feel right at the Woo at the moment. And I guess that moves me to what do you think Rudans' future is at the club?
I don't know if he's going to go another season. I don't know if the kind of performances, the way they ended the season and missing out on finals, and their owners have got big ambitions, and they really want to see the club be as successful as possible. I mean, all owners do in theory, but like the group behind Western United, they're only just through their second season as a club. They would have really wanted to build on last season, and they'll see this as a huge disappointment after they went all in for Rudan. I don't see how they can. I don't see how they can sort of keep the faith after that.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, and it'll be an interesting fallout. I mean, especially if they don't qualify through the FFA Cup playoffs. To see what happens there, and I think that could be the final, the straw that breaks the camel's back for Mark Rudin if they don't get through those playoffs. But I think the one last point I want to make on this game is the retirement of Andrew Durante. He's the record games holder in the ALeague. He's played for Newcastle, Wellington, and the Woo. He's played over 412 games in all Australian domestic football. I think he's the sixth most games of all time in our top flight in this country. A wonderful, what's the word I'm looking for? He's a great example of what a professional footballer should be. He's had a 20-year-long career. And, he's a consummate professional, and he has been everywhere. And it was really good to see, all him and his family and his extended family celebrated, and the guard of honor he got on the pitch, because, that's it's what football's all about at the end of the day is the moments you have with fans and family. So I think that's a good moment to celebrate for Durante.
He's the Gareth Barry of the A-League.
Yeah. If only he played midfield.
He could. Who do you think would win in the race, Damo? Gareth Barry or Durante?
Jeez, I wouldn't be willing to bet on either. Can I bet on the snail in the race? Oh, all right. We'll move on to the next game, which was Brisbane versus Sydney. Obviously, Brisbane had a lot to play for here. Sydney had already wrapped up second spot. Well, I mean, Brisbane had already wrapped up a home final, but a lot to play for in terms of their run in the finals and their run to the grand final. They could have avoided Adelaide. They could have avoided Melbourne City. Now they've got to play. They've got to play Adelaide and City and Sydney if they want to win it all, you would assume. So if they're going to win now, Brisbane, they're going to win it the tough way. And us both being Brisbane fans, it was kind of hard to watch that game on the weekend. Colby, I know you were there. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, it was great to be there. It was my first time in Redcliffe. Some listeners may know or may have sort of figured out by now. I've relocated back to Brisbane. I narrowly avoided the Melbourne lockdown, which would have absolutely torpedoed this move, and managed to get up to Redcliffe for the final game of the season. It was a great day. There was like over 8,000 people there. The place was rocking. It was like quite a warm winter afternoon up here in Brisbane.
Looked like a beautiful day on TV.
It was a bloody
From my
day.
couch.
I tell you what, if I wasn't driving, I would have had a few more golds. But it was actually a good game. The Raw played pretty well. But I would say that the difference was the entire back line of Sydney, missing Redmayne and McGowan as well. But they were just, I mean, Hewitt Bell came in and made 2 critical saves. The Raw could have had 2 goals easily out of those saves. To be fair, the Raw didn't really test the back line much other than that. But and a couple of the fullbacks for Brisbane had a bit of an average day, which you know, we lost a bit there. But no, take nothing away from the Sydney back line. All of them had a really great game.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to make, because Ben Warland and Tom Hewitt-Bell, who both not played very much football this season, I think less than 10 games combined between them for the course of the season. Obviously, came in and deputised for McGowan and Redmayne, who are away on international duty. And you mentioned Tom Hewitt-Bell making a couple of huge saves. I think over the course of the match, he made 7 saves and got in a man of the match appearance. So a huge step for him to come in and play that well. And I think another talking point was, and another credit to how well Sydney's defence played, is that Brisbane actually had, I think, 31 shots throughout the game with only 6 on target. I think 14 of those shots were blocked. So it was desperation defence from Sydney.
You'll like this, Damo. I looked up the XG for this one.
Oh, here we go.
Brisbane for 0 goals had an XG of 2.04. Brisbane for 0 goals. Sydney for their 2 goals had an XG of 0.96. So Sydney, clinical, Brisbane, wasteful.
Well, I think it was the story of the game, right? And Sydney went out and they scored an early goal, and they were comfortable and happy to sit in and defend for the vast majority of the game. I think the problem is that Brisbane didn't really show that sense of desperation and urgency that they have in the past to chase leads. It kind of just felt like Brisbane were going through the motions and keeping the ball for the sake of keeping the ball, and it was a foregone conclusion. And I think you made a good point, Colby. It was about 15, maybe 10 minutes to go, and Warren Moon brought on a couple of academy players, and you just said, "Oh, you know, Mooney's given in here," or something like that. And I think it really kind of summed up what the game was for Brisbane. It was like, "Oh, if we win, we win, but cool, we've already got a home final. Let's prepare for it." But in saying that, I mean, Warren Moon handed out 2 debuts. We're talking about youth. It's probably the theme of this podcast. And he handed a debut to Anthony Burke-Gilroy, who he's a signing from Altona Magic in the Victorian NPL, who's got history with Jesse Daly playing for the Tacoma Defiance in the US. So he's come into the club as obviously his first A-League appearance, and another appearance for an academy product from an A-League club, and Eli Adams. And I just want to get your opinion on him, Colby. I thought he was brilliant. He's a tall young guy. I think he's only 18. He's got a lot of muscle to fill out over his years, but I really feel like
he's got a lot to fill out. You could see how skinny he was when he came on as well.
Yeah, I really feel like this kid could be something good. Yeah, he's got a great touch, and Tommy will hate me saying this, but he's got a great touch for a big man.
But I thought, I mean, clearly, and I know we've spoken about it a lot, but we have to repeat this as well. The best of the day was just Alex Parsons. He was, every time he got the ball, he looked like he was going to make something happen. He was unpredictable. You know, he was just electric. Every time he got the ball, you knew something was going to happen. So, I really can't wait to see how he goes next season, and hopefully he has a good finals campaign before people figure out that he has no right foot.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. He's really come onto the stage and really, lit up the league in the last probably month particularly, but having a long stretch of games where you consistently perform is the key to a good player. And can he come in next year after a proper preseason? And we may see Dylan Wenzel-Halls leave Brisbane Roar. It's the rumor that he's taken an offer with the Woo, a bit more money. So, Parsons may have a lot more responsibility coming into next year, and he'll have to really, put that kind of forward line on his shoulders. Even if Dan Zaki's not there, Brisbane have got some got some responsibility to pass around, and that a lot of that might fall on Parsons. So it'll be really interesting to see, how he goes next year.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah, moving on, we'll move on to the McBulls versus the Knicks. The finals hopes are pretty much all over for Wellington coming into this game, unfortunately, after Adelaide got the job done the night before. But they really turned it on, I feel, against Macarthur, who still had a lot to play for. They had third spot in the home final to play for, and I actually thought this was a great game to watch. I was going for the Knicks, but as a neutral fan, this would have been a brilliant game to watch. It was back and forth, chances at both end, and David Ball, slotted home a great finish after a tidy assist from Tomer Hemed, that little back heel to put him in on goal, open the scoring. But I think the real changing moment of this game was the red card on the hour for Loic Puyo. Sorry. It's a pretty controversial decision. Colby, what were your thoughts on this red card, and do you think it's what changed the game?
I'm not sure it did change the game, to be honest, because I think it happened at 2-0, and I think Wellington were already in the ascendancy by this time. And I'm actually not too sure, I'm not clear on what the rule is here. The commentators were talking about, if his studs hits the guy's knee, it's got to be a red, and the other one was talking about, he's actually pulled out there, so it's not a red. So, I mean, watching it live, it didn't look like much, but then once I saw it on the replay and saw how high the boot was and that studs did make contact above the shin guard, I sort of thought, well, it's actually probably fair enough for the ref to call it. But I actually don't know what the letter of the law says on this one.
Yeah, I feel like those ones are always such a grey area and so open to interpretation, like a lot of rules in football. And a lot of times people talk about intent, with the studs up, and these things actually aren't written into the rule, to the laws of the game, intent and having your studs up. But they're often the key points that people talk about when there's a red card like this. So yeah, it's kind of difficult to weigh up whether this was, obviously his foot was high, but they were both challenging for the ball. And but yeah, look, it was a talking point, and if you're a Macarthur fan, you would blame the results on that. You would say that was a changing point in the game, even though, as you said, Colby, it didn't really feel like there was any shift in momentum from that.
Well, I think what you'd be blowing up about even more is that he's got a red card. He misses the next games, and
yeah, that's a big deal.
Critical finals. So that's, if I was a Macarthur fan, that's what I'd be blowing up about. That he's got the red, and for me, I was like, well, that game was probably already over. It didn't really matter anyway. Sure, we would have wanted to have some momentum going into the finals, but yeah, even worse result is that Puyo will miss the elimination final that Macarthur are going to have to play. But fair play to him. I don't know whether you saw this. Once the VAR's reviewed it and he's got the red, he goes up and shakes the hand of the Knicks player that's down on the ground still before walking off. And I just thought that was pretty good sportsmanship from him. A lot of players would have sort of blown up and had a tantrum and sort of, if they were disagreeing with the decision, they would have made that known and sort of stormed off. But I thought he was a very good sport.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think a lot of soccer Twitter was talking about on this game, late on in the game, was a challenge on Clayton Lewis that probably was more deserving of a red card, in my opinion anyway, than the red card that was. VAR reviewed this, and it was a horrible challenge. He slid in, he took his ankle straight with his studs up, nearly both feet, and for me that would be a description of a red card. But I don't know if you saw it, Colby, but the inconsistencies in this kind of thing, and how VAR can review one but not review the other, it's things that really need to be ironed out before we move into a new season.
Yeah, I feel like we're like a broken record here, but they just need to get the application of VAR right, and the less said about that, the better. But just on the game as a whole, I don't know what Ufuk Tale's done. Has he got the Knicks players in a room for the entire day beforehand, and they didn't know the results of the Western Sydney game that was crucial to win, which meant that they didn't go through into the finals? Because if you're watching this game as a neutral and a neutral who didn't know one team was through and one team wasn't, you would say that the Knicks were the ones that were going through to the finals, and MacArthur.
Yeah, it felt like, it felt like the Knicks still had something to play for and MacArthur didn't, when it was actually the other way around. And it's a good point, and I think we'll probably talk about it more in our A-League season review, and we'll get Jesse's opinion on it. Why the Knicks didn't make the finals, and I think it's a really good conversation to have then. But I just wanted to touch on their run in towards the end of the season, and they really relied very heavily on Tomo Hamed, who I think he scored for his 5th consecutive game. He's the first Knicks player to ever do that, and again starred in this game with a goal and an assist, and even missed a penalty. So he could have had an even better performance. And the last point, you got something you want to go?
No, I was just gonna agree with everything you said about Tomo Hamed. He's done brilliantly well for the Knicks. So much so that I forgot David Ball was a Knicks player when he sort of featured prominently in this game. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. He still plays for them. It's down to how good Hamed's been that he's just made me forget all about this other, marquee striker that they've got.
Yeah, and just like in the Woo game, I think an important point to note in this game was Mark Milligan retired. Obviously, he's played for a handful of A-League clubs as well. He's tried his hand at some overseas clubs. He went to Asia and came back to the A-League. But I think Mark Milligan's legacy for his career is playing for his country. He had 80 caps for Australia. He went to 4 World Cups. And I think Tommy made a good point in a group chat earlier this week saying, is he one of Australia's most underappreciated Socceroos of all time?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And another great moment. You saw him out on the pitch with his 4 daughters before the game. And it was a great sight to see, because football's all about those moments, and it was great to have one for him. We'll move on to the last game of the round. It was a 2-2 draw between Adelaide and the Wanderers. This game was the one we spoke about, that the Knicks relied on the Wanderers to get all 3 points here to keep their hopes alive. But this is actually a great game on Thursday night. It was brilliant to watch, and there was a lot to play for. Adelaide secured their spot. All they needed was 1 point. They got it. It was funny. Ryan Strain was involved at both ends in 2 own goals in the early stages of the game. With Adelaide going 1-0 up, but Wanderers bounced back and they took the lead on the half hour. It was a great finish from Graham Dorrans. Great, wonderful piece of technique. It was very much like Jack Clisby's goal, if I'm being honest. That kind of volley into the bottom corner. Yeah, that Dorrans finish is Clisby-esque. That's the best compliment I can give it. But again, the talking point from this game was a red card, and this was Tas Mortakudis went down to 10 men, just went down to a red card, and the Wanderers went down to 10 men just before half time. And it was a very well-deserved red card. There's no controversy about that one. It was a horrible challenge. But Adelaide from then on out really dominated the game, and Knicks fans were praying that the Wanderers could hold on, but they just couldn't. And the onslaught ended when Goodwin scored that all-important goal, which got them the point. And I kind of felt like Adelaide nearly even sat in for the remainder of the game there. That they'd done what they needed to do, and they didn't need to open themselves up anymore.
Although there was 1 point in the game, it was after the Wanderers went down to 10 men. It was about a sort of 70th minute odd when Scotty Mack was on the end of a through ball, 1-on-1 with the keeper, just outside the 18-yard box. He had a couple of defenders close behind him, and he looked for all money like he was at least going to have a good goal-scoring opportunity. And mate, he just
all those 39 years caught up to him in that moment.
He didn't have the pace or the guile to sort of create an opportunity for himself out of that. And I think that just tells you everything you need to know about where he's at right now.
Yeah, and look, I think a good point on Adelaide is they have looked great in building the ball out from the back and playing through midfield, but just like a few other teams this round, they looked really wasteful in the front third of the pitch and really couldn't take their chances. And I think moving into the finals, if they don't take those chances, then their finals could be over just as quick as they start. And I think they're coming up against Brisbane, who, Brisbane have been deadly especially at home. Redcliffe's a hard place to go. So
Just
it'll
on
be an
that,
interesting
Damo,
matchup.
we didn't talk about okay. So two things we didn't talk about in the Brisbane game, the fact that the home finals are going to be in Redcliffe, and we had a question from one of our listeners, Matt Olson, got in my DMs and he was asking me what I thought about Redcliffe finals, because it's obviously not going to be at Suncorp. What are your thoughts about that, Damo? Do you have a problem with finals being held at Redcliffe?
I don't. I actually think having a final at Redcliffe, it increases the demand of the tickets. So I feel like finals will be sellouts at Redcliffe, and it's only going to be the people who are desperate to go to these games are going to be first in to buy them. So you would imagine that Brisbane Roar have got 12,500, really passionate fans that want to be at a final that will be there. So I actually think it'll be great. I think the atmosphere will be pumping, especially if it's a night game. The atmosphere there at Redcliffe seems like it's absolutely brilliant. I've got no problem with it. And, and I think I saw a funny thing today that, if Brisbane do end up hosting the grand final, it'll have to be at Redcliffe because the State of Origin is on at Suncorp on the same night.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't imagine a grand final there, but I'll be happy if the boys make it.
Maybe have to move a grand final to Ballymore.
Oh,
turn back the clock.
And just back to the Adelaide Western Sydney game that we were talking about. How are Western Sydney though? Coming into the season being Snakes FC, poaching Troisi, who got booed by the Adelaide fans all throughout this game. They've taken Scotty Mack from Brisbane. They've taken Abini. They've taken Ugarkovic and got Carl Robinson in, and they've swaggered around like they're a real big fish, and they've made these moves like they're a real big club, and then to miss the finals again, just not great.
Yeah, and look, and I think I put a tweet out about this during this game that said the Wanderers, staring down the barrel of missing finals football for the 5th consecutive season. For the 6th time in the 9 seasons they've been in the A-League. And I can't remember who it was. Sorry, I'm not giving credit to you, but someone responded to me and said, yeah, well, 2 of those 3 seasons that they made the finals, they actually had an increased salary cap and exemption from the normal salary cap because they were a new club. So really, 1 out of 9 seasons on a level playing field have the Wanderers made a grand final. And like you said, they came into this season, prancing about like they were a big club, and the Western Sydney Wanderers fans, with all right, think they're a big club. Financially, they are a big club, but in terms of results, they're not.
Act like this with this disproportionate level of success.
Yeah, it's a really good point because
Spurs, you'd have to say it's like a Spurs comparison, wouldn't you? They won a trophy back in the 60s, and they're continually sort of there or thereabouts in the top 6 maybe, and they're just swaggering around like they're a huge club, building huge stadiums and doing big things, and everyone's like, well, when are you going to start winning?
Yeah, and look, you could have said that, yeah, but they're a big club with off-field success, but recently they're not. The fans aren't turning up to Bank West. They've got dismal crowds. They've got heaps of problems with security and New South Wales Police with the RBB, who seemingly are non-existent these days. It's their off-field success is mirroring their on-field success at the moment. There's just none of it. So it'll be interesting to see where the Wanderers go from here and what their expectations are moving forward, because, and as we've mentioned, the fans believe that they are a big club and one of the biggest in the country, but at the moment, nothing about them says that they are. Next up, we'll talk about the Socceroos. Colby, the Roos got up 3-0 over Kuwait the other day. Obviously, Lecky scoring in the first minute. Jackson Irvine getting on the score sheet from a rebounded penalty that Marty Boyle missed, and then Aiden Hrustic with a free kick late on in the second half. What were your overall thoughts on the game, and how good is it to have the Roos back playing football?
It's so bloody good to have the Roos back. I tell you what, I was so excited when I got up for this game. It was like 5 a.m. on a Friday. going into the weekend, the Roos are back. I woke up very happy. Convincing win. You can only beat what's in front of you. I found out that Kuwait are semi-pro. That's a fact I learned for the first time.
Yeah, me
watching this
too.
game.
Yeah.
I thought the Roos, did well against them. All things considered, they did what they had to do. 3-0 win. They didn't concede at all. Didn't really look in trouble. They did well in the conditions because it was like 40-degree heat out there. And it just feels a bit like a new era. Like I said at the top, with some players out, some players like your Milligans and Jedinaks and others who have retired. And then you've got Moy and Rogic in particular, who were notable absentees from the squad because of injury and family commitments. But it felt like a new era. Rustic season.
Yeah, rustic season. Yeah, no, you're right. It really felt like an ushering of a new era of the Roos, and I actually feel like Graham Arnold kind of made a real point of that. It's been nearly 18 months since the Socceroos played a game and had a camp, and he made a real point that this is a different team. We rely on our youngsters. We are going to be so good because of the young players we've got pushing for spots in the team. And I think by the squad that he played in this game and the kind of, he handed 3 debuts and 1 starting debut in this game, it was kind of like a message to existing players in the squad and to the Australian football public. Look, this is a new generation of Socceroos. And talking about debuts, it was a Socceroos debut for Fran Karacic, Riley McGree, and Kenny Dougal, who I think particularly Karacic and Dougal played quite well. Karacic obviously all 90 minutes. Dougal was impressive when he came off the bench. McGree, he showed what he can do. Aiden Hrustic had a starting debut, and I think Soccer Twitter spoke a lot about him. But Colby, what were your thoughts on his performance?
Yeah, I'm fully with Soccer Twitter on this one. He just looked completely assured. He looked a player in very good form, incredible touch, and just like so good to see a Socceroo wearing the 10, and you get him, he gets the ball, and you're like, wow, something's going to happen, rather than he's going to run into a cul-de-sac and just get stuck, and nothing's going to happen. Like the 10 is a special number in world football, particularly in internationals. Obviously, it's an important number at club level as well. But good to see a player like that sort of seeming to fill the jersey with a bit of pride.
Yeah, I thought it was great, and I thought a great point about this was Shannon actually was involved in a press conference pre-game where he was able to virtually ask Graham Arnold a question, where he said, with Rogic and Moy absent from the squad, is it someone like Hrustic that comes in and fills that number 10 role naturally? And Graham Arnold was brutally honest with his response and said, yeah, look, he's a completely different player from when he was in camp 18 months ago. He's developed physically, he's developed emotionally, and his position has changed. He's moved from a majority wide player to he's in the center of the park now. And he said that, and a lot of managers say that about their players to feel confidence in the fans and to feel confidence in their players. But I genuinely believe what Graham Arnold said in his response to Shannon was 100% true. Aiden Hrustic is a completely different player from what we saw 18 months ago.
And he's 24 as well.
Yeah. And look, and I think it's important to note that he's really fought his way through European leagues. He left Australia, I think it was at 15 years old, and he went to a club in England, and then I think Austria Vienna, and then another couple of clubs across Europe. And he found first team football in the Netherlands, where he got some time. He played alongside Arjen Robben at Groningen, which I'm sure was a great experience for a young player like him. And then obviously his most recent move to Eintracht Frankfurt, where he's playing in the Bundesliga. He's really, it's kind of a, I guess you'd say it's the old Australian way of making it as a professional football. You fight your way through the lower leagues of Europe until you finally get your move. And I think cutting your teeth in those kind of leagues really prepares you a little different way than it does coming from the ALeague and transitioning over there. Not that that's a bad route, but it's a different way of doing it. And Kenny Dougal's done the same thing. So I think it's good to see that although the A-League is now coming a long ways and we're producing our own talent, there's still kids that are slipping through the cracks here in Australia that are going to Europe and making something of themselves.
And how good was the Kenny Dougal love from the Blackpool fans, all hitting around his debut. And the Socceroos official account put out a tweet at the end of the game saying, "Oh, who do you think the man of the match was?" And it was just being flooded by Blackpool fans saying Kenny Dougal. I mean, he played well, but he just came on off the bench, so clearly wasn't man of the match when compared with Worcester. But that kind of stuff, you love to see it because he's made himself an instant legend at that club by guiding them to promotion and scoring the 2 goals in the playoff final. So good on him, and it makes you pretty proud.
Yeah, it's awesome to see. And as much as we talk about players making debuts and coming into the squad, I think a couple of important appearances to note were Ryan McGowan started at centre half. He played 90 minutes for Sydney just 4 days earlier or 5 days earlier in the A-League and flew out to the Middle East and played 90 minutes here against Kuwait. And that was his first appearance in about 4 years for the Socceroos. And James Holland anchored the midfield. And I thought he was understatedly brilliant for the Socceroos. He kept the ball moving. He was like a metronome there in midfield, moving the ball back and forth. And that was his first appearance for Australia in 6.5 years. I think it was you, Colby. You posed a good question, which said, is James Holland, has he improved exponentially, or has he just been a product of we've had so much depth in that position that now he's able to come into it?
And I think I was right.
Yeah, very, very much so. It's a bit of both, I'd say. I think he's come along leaps and bounds, and he's made a career of himself in Austria. He's been there for a long time, and
he's
obviously he's been sitting in behind Gedinak and then Milligans. So, it's tough to get a gig over those guys, but I think that role for the Socceroos is well and truly his right now. And talking about positions that are well and truly people's, moving into the next game, or not even just the next game in general, who do you think our strongest 11 is? Actually, probably the first question to ask you is who do you think comes in for the next game? Do you think we rotate, or what do you think the starting 11 looks like in the next game?
Yeah, I think that's good to make that distinction, Damo, because I think they are two very different questions. Who comes in for the next game, and what does our strongest 11 look like? Because I don't think they're necessarily the same team.
They're not the same thing, definitely not.
Yeah, because coming into the next game, with the greatest respect to Taiwan, I think that Graham Arnold will be looking to rotate in this game, and I think he'll be looking to reward players. I mean, I'm hoping he'll be looking to reward players who have done well for their clubs, like your Rukovicias and McLarens and Tongi as well. And I'd even like to see my boy Brad Smith get a run. So I think those are the kind of players I'd be looking to bring in, or I'm hoping Graham Arnold will be looking to bring in just to give them some game time and to just test out different things with his squad.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there could be wholesale changes in this game coming up. Obviously, it's only been 4 days when they'll start from the last game, and just looking at the starting 11 from the Kuwait game, I feel like, yep, you can bring McLaren and Rukovica in. You can bring Smith in for Bajic. You can bring Grant in for Karadzic. You can bring Tonjik in for McGowan. You can also bring Borrello can come in from a bill. You can bring either of the keepers in for Matty Ryan, although you would assume if Lecky's not playing, Matty Ryan will captain the side and he will start. But yeah, you can make wholesale changes to this side and we'll still comfortably win this game. Obviously, Taiwan aren't a great side. But yeah, I guess that moves on to the next question is, what do you think our strongest 11 looks like?
This was a really tough question, actually. There was a lot, because there are a lot of players in that squad who, on paper, you'd think would be in our strongest 11, but haven't necessarily been playing much club football at the moment. And so it was very interesting. But my strongest 11, I think, would have to still have Matty Ryan in goals. I think Bajic has got the left back spot locked down. As much as I'd like Smithy to get some more game time, I think our strongest pairing at the back would be a Degenak and a Sutar, considering where they're playing for their clubs.
Yep.
And Karacic. I mean, before this game, I didn't know much about Karacic, and I think he got called up once by Ange, but I haven't seen much of him before. But he had a really good game this game, so I mean, I'd put him ahead of Ryan Grant in that spot. In the midfield, I'd have Rustic, Irvine, and Dougal. Probably very attacking, and probably not the most balanced midfield. You'd probably want a Holland in there for balance, but I like the three of them. So yeah, but Holland, would be unlucky to miss out on that. And up front, I'd have Boyle, Leckie, and Borello, and Mabil missing out because
no Jamie McLaren is a surprise to me. In my opinion, he'd be first on the team sheet.
Yeah, and Leckie, although he hasn't been playing a lot himself recently, I think just on his international experience and the sort of the way you seem to be playing, I think you'd still have him there over McLaren. He's got a bit more versatility as well.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, you could play Leckie as one of the three wide men. You could play him as a 9. He's done both before. He's played as a wing back before. He's got a lot of versatility. You're right. It would be really tough to pick a strongest 11. And I think it's actually to Graham Arnold's advantage that these 4 games that we've got over the next, I think 2 and a bit weeks, that he doesn't really have to pick his strongest 11 in any 4 of these games. He can really play pretty much everyone that's in the squad. He can give them a lot of minutes and kind of figure out what works and who's going to fit together. So I think that's really good that we've got that kind of opportunity to do that. As terms for predictions for the Taiwan game, Colby, what are your thoughts? That's on Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. Australian time. How do you think it'll shake out?
Well, we should win this one. We should be winning every one of these games. Like we should be walking this group, to be honest. And fiddling with the squad and getting all of that kind of stuff locked in. That's what we should be using this for. Of course, we should be taking these games seriously as they're World Cup qualifiers. But we are favourites to win the group, and we should be. I'd say another 3-0 would be great. I think a clean sheet is should be the goal, like a win and a clean sheet.
Yeah. It'll be exciting to watch nonetheless. Obviously, us talking about having the Roos back, we've both got Australian tops on, so it'll be great. It'll be great to watch them again on Tuesday morning, and that'll be all for us this week on More Than a Game. You can obviously follow us on Twitter. And you can like us on Facebook. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, and you can listen to the episodes about a day earlier on YouTube. We put the links out as we're recording. And obviously you can send us any questions, thoughts to mtagpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, enjoy the football.
See you.